Honor Society induction ceremony over at Darien High School. 91 students were inducted, including our very own Ryan and Kylie. Congratulations to all the students and to Ryan and Kylie. This morning, I joined the students and faculty and CAS as well at Fitch Academy for their traditional Thanksgiving celebration known as Fitchgiving. It was a great way to connect with the wonderful Fitch community this morning, and we had a really good time and some good food too. This afternoon, the inaugural Gravy Bowl was held at Darien High School. Junior girls played senior girls in flag football, with the seniors winning a thrilling game by a score of 21-14. And this is such a great new tradition. I hope you'll all come next year. Early this morning, I dropped off 4 turkeys for the Darien High School Band Turkey Collection. While the collection will help many families in need, it also added a bit of competition versus New Canaan. Darien donated a total of 170 turkeys and prevailed in the competition. New Canaan's band performed our school's fight song while their drum major wore our football jerseys. So congratulations to the Darien High School band and to the New Canaan band for collecting incredible amounts of food for the community. And finally, I'd like to wish everyone a happy, healthy, and safe Thanksgiving. And that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Byrne. Student representative reports.
Yeah, as Dr. Byrne mentioned, our 91 of our upperclassmen were inducted into National Honor Society yesterday. So congratulations to Kylie and all the other upperclassmen. Along with that, our senior girls compete against our junior girls in a Gravy Bowl, a flag football game, which I think was amazing for all the students and faculty that were there to watch this afternoon. So hope to keep that tradition going. Along with that, our boys football team is traveling to New Canaan this Thursday for the annual Turkey Bowl. So hope for a big win there. And last Saturday, our girls field hockey team actually won state. So congratulations to them and all the players and the coaching staff for a great win there.
Yeah, so we just had the November band concert where I saw Dr. Byrne there as well. As Dr. Byrne also said, we had the turkey drive, which was very exciting. DHS band won against New Canaan, which is a lot of fun. And then we just finished the play Almost Maine. There were 3 amazing shows this past weekend and looking forward to another month of musical fun.
Thank you, Kylie and Ryan. We'll move on to presentation, discussion, and possible action. The presentation and discussion on October 1st district enrollment report and projections. Mr. Rich Rudel, and we have Mr. Michael Zuba from MP Planning Group.
Good evening, everybody. So for tonight's presentation, I'm going to touch on the highlights. I know right before the holiday, it's a busy week. Everybody's trying to work through things, but I know we gave the full report too. So if there's any questions on anything, even as a follow-up, I'm glad to be able to address those when you have a chance to really kind of dig into it. So we always begin with enrollment drivers. I think that's always a big key. I picked out the 2 most key drivers for Darien. As you can see in the chart on the left, births have been up over the last several years. Births have stayed elevated. No big surprise there that that's going to lead to some larger kindergarten cohorts in the near future. But home sales have been down. So ever since peaking right around the beginning of the pandemic, and we've seen this in many of our Durgay client communities and really kind of throughout the Northeast, we've seen home sales drop off. What that is leading to is less turnover, less churn. All very familiar with your own community, pretty built out in Darien. So if you're not turning over existing single family homes, not a lot of new single family homes being built, leads to a little bit lower immigration overall within the school community. Getting into construction activity, every year we reach out to the town planning and zoning department. They wealth of information. They're wonderful in getting us all the details that we need. This chart represents the latest and greatest information that we've gotten from them. So what we track is we track recently completed projects. We use those for 2 things. We see how far along they are, how many students are being generated out of them. And then later on down the road, as they become a little bit more mature, we use those to develop our school specific multipliers for Darien. So as we get new projects coming on board, rather than just relying on some of the published multipliers, we have ones that are specific to your community. So that's shown in the upper top portion of that green bar. We're also tracking those that are partially completed. So those partially completed are also feeding into our student generation models. Those are projects that either a early phase was completed, and now we're moving on to phase two, since as the Corbin project, or they're projects that are just getting kicked off now. And then last but not least, we have our pipeline projects, which those are approved, but construction has not yet begun. So those are ones that we're really keeping an eye on. We're looking at what the potential yield looks like. And for those projects is where we really start to be able to add our student generation multipliers. So for each project, we want to be able to understand where they're at, how they feed within the elementary school communities themselves, get an understanding of how many children are coming out of them currently, and then what the future yield looks like. We also recognize that within the community, there's other smaller developments. All those projects do add children to the community, but they get captured in our baseline modeling and our baseline projections overall. So the ones that we're really kind of tracking and keeping an eye on, we have Norotan Heights, the shopping center project there. That's going to be one of the ones that we see future students being generated out of. Corbin District as well. The phase two of that, phase one, I believe, was only 38 units. Phase two is 80 units overall, so a much larger component of that project. Parklands Drive, a fairly significant project there, just under 60 units. And then Trammell Cove at about 175 units overall. 3 of the 4 projects feed into Tokenique Elementary School. So as a kind of little spoiler, you'll see later on, we're seeing some of the enrollment at Tokenique driven up by those student multipliers rather than demographically driven. And then the top project in Norotan Heights is feeding into Royal. So for all these projects, we're estimating that if there was no other development in town, we'd have about 86 students generated. But based on an average baseline of about 160 units that have recently been completed, we have to go through kind of a deduction, right? So we're trying to square it up a little bit because baseline, growth net is always occurring. So you want to be able to deduct that baseline growth out. So we're seeing a total of about 50 total students being generated from the school age, from the developments for school age children. About 20 of those going into the elementary, about 14 into the middle, and just under 20 going into the high school overall. Getting into our student migration highlights. So over the last several years, as you can see on the chart on the right, our net migration has been up in Darien. I'm seeing positive immigration after years of having some fluctuations there, but by and large, some out migration, especially at the elementary level. This past year, we saw no net migration in and actually a little migration out, really due to that housing turnover or lack thereof. The chart on the left is our new to district students. So what that is we use the state SACID ID and compare from one year to the next to be able to see if a student was part of Darien Public Schools at a point in the past, and if they weren't, we tag those as new to district. So that really gives us a focused analysis on our immigration. And what you can see overall is after, a typical spike that we saw early on in the pandemic, that number has been going down over the last several years. And that number kind of mirrors the total housing sales within the community overall. So that total housing sales and that activity in the market itself is a really good proxy for those new students being able to come into the district. And this past year, we saw a net out migration of about 1.3%, which was the highest going back about 16 years. So we haven't seen that level of out migration since right after the Great Recession, where we had, really subdued housing sales overall during that same period. Getting into our overall enrollment projections, we developed 3 different models. Those models are fed by our 3 different birth models, as well as our different modeling on immigration within the community. So we're looking at the last 6-year average as kind of our benchmark, where we're picking up some of the highs of the early parts of the pandemic, and we're also picking up some of the recent lows with that reduced housing turn and turnover overall. So the high model is above that 6-year average, which was just 0.3%. The medium projection model is slightly above that at 0.4%. And then the low model is below that. So really we have an optimistic model, a model that we think is going to be the best fit, which is that medium model. And then we have a pessimistic model for that. And as you can see, our cone of uncertainty there on the chart on the right, within the first 5 years of projections are always your most accurate, especially at the elementary school level. As you get a little further out, You could see where that cone of uncertainty between those three different projection models starts to span out a little bit wider. That's where it becomes a little bit more assumption driven. So those assumptions on births, those assumptions on in-migration and housing turnover, and what the market's going to be able to look like at that point in time in years 5 to 10, those are unknown. So we're modeling different conditions there. But overall, you could see that that red line representing the low model or the pessimistic model is showing fairly flat enrollment out over the next 10 years, whereas the green model, which we see as the most likely, is showing modest growth early on and then more moderate growth in those years 5 to 10. And then the high model, which is just the slight stack above that, is mirroring that medium model, showing that continued growth throughout that 10-year projection horizon. This is a disaggregated look looking at a stacked bar chart of the total projections for that medium model. We're seeing that K-12 overall is going to remain fairly stable and then modestly increase by about 2% right through the projection midpoint. Our elementary projections are going to increase by about 9% over the next decade, getting growth up to that high 2,275 or so range towards the back half of our projection horizon. Middle school projections are going to remain fairly stable over the next several years before reaching that mark of about 1,100 students towards the back half of our projection horizon. So when you begin looking at that, that's really kind of years 8 to 10 of that projection. And then at the high school overall, we're projecting a decline to about 1,250 students, getting right around the projection midpoint. And then we see some stabilization right around that 1,300 student mark going forward. Getting into the individual elementary schools, we have homes growing at about 4% in that first 5 years, or by about 40 students in that first 5 years. We have Tokenique being driven by some of those new developments, is the largest growth there at 42 students overall. Oxbridge at about 3 dozen in that first 5 years, followed by Royal and then Hindley at just 16 students over that same period of time. For the elementary school projections, especially the individual schools, we like to focus on that first 5 years. We have students in seats, we have known births. Those are really our most accurate as we get out in years 5 to 10, especially on the individual elementary schools. It becomes much more small area and assumption driven for those. So really kind of that midpoint in our projections is really the limit on the individual schools themselves. And then last, I'll just kind of recap some of my key takeaways. I know I touched on a bunch of these, but over the next 5 years, the elementary schools increase of about 8%. Middle school stable, and in that next 5 years, high school declines by about 6%. And then beyond 5 years is where we see enrollment, especially at the middle school, averaging about 1,100 students. The elementary stabilizes at about 2,275, and then the high school rebounds and averages about 1,285 as we see some of those larger cohorts that are currently in the elementary and middle begin to work their way up in those last years of our 10-year projection. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the board. If they have any questions, I'm happy to be able to address those. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. One question I do have is how have your projections over the past couple of years, ended up coming out versus what we had anticipated?
So overall, we've been really kind of benchmarking at about 1% per year. What's really kind of thrown us off a little bit has been K. K was always really not easy to project, but we were really good at it until the start date change. So now in year 2, we were off a little bit for that, a little bit more than we would have liked. So we've been doing a deeper dive and looking at what the breakdown of those age groups are for the kids that are entering kindergarten now. And I think by year 3, that'll really tighten up that projection overall. But typically we do about 1% per year per grade on our projections.
And with the new developments in town, which I think are also a large factor here, particularly the ones that have not started yet, such as I think it's the Thorndale 175 units. How are you putting that into the projections?
So with that, we get information from the planning department on when they think that they're going to have substantial completion of a project based on the developer's information, the construction schedule. So we're constantly adjusting that as we do our updates. So we get that when they look to be able to complete the project substantially, and then we factor in a little bit of a buffer time for when certificates of occupancy are going to be issued. And then ultimately, it takes several years for that to become matured. So as we look at those developments, we'll start phasing it in the one you gave an example of, 27, 28, but really it becomes more of a midpoint in our projection where we're actually going to see students really into that, because it just takes some time for those to mature, get families into them and get the school age children number up for those. But it's more of an art than a science because the timing of those projects are really they're under the control of a construction program, and it's private development. It's not like it's school construction where you're on a much more public construction on a rigid schedule. So market factors, materials, labor, that all comes into play there. So that adds a little wobble to our numbers overall, to be honest with you.
Thank you. Are there board
Yeah.
questions? Oh, Joanna.
So I don't know if you can answer this or maybe Dr. Byrne or Rich can answer this, but you said that the retention rate for eighth graders hasn't been this low since 2007, 2008. Is that like a national trend or a statewide trend, or is that a Darien trend?
That's a really good question. We're seeing a little bit of a similar trend through some of our other Durgay communities in Connecticut. Over the last couple of years, where we're seeing students look for other opportunities between that 8 to 9 switch. And it's been picking up. I'll show that has been picking up over the last year and a half to 2 years in the numbers we're seeing in some other Durgay communities. So we pull the data together from our other clients to be able to look at it because it gives us a larger sample. But it's something that we'll definitely watch as we continue to project the high school enrollment out.
Thank you. John?
Just going back one slide to slide 9.
Sure.
Obviously, we have the breakdown of student projections for all the elementary schools. Is there a way to show what the capacity for students within those schools are? And what percentage of the capacity that would be for each school?
You may already have the capacities. What I would do is I would marry it to your capacities and then you could show it as a percentage. I'm just doing the enrollment projections. I don't know the capacities of the building. But I think the architects behind me may know the capacities of the building. So I would say take this information, tie it to the capacity, and then you could kind of look ahead and understand what it means from a seat count and an overall utilization standpoint. That's a really good
It's
question.
really something we can follow up and take
Yeah.
a look at.
Just these numbers alone, there's just no context.
Yeah, we could definitely.
You're
take a
right.
look at that.
Because it seems like we're overburdening Tokenique.
Yeah. That's gonna be my next question too, because Tokenique already has the Avalon units, which are the opposite side of town from Tokenique, right? So it kind of goes against the whole neighborhood school vibe. And then.
Yeah, I think they were placed there because of capacity back when this was a number of years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I just following up on that. I think based on your projections, Tokenique, Oxbridge, and Holmes were the top 3 over the 10-year period that would have a significant influx. So I do think that is something we could probably think about. Katie?
Thank you. I wanted to ask, so given the swings on the elementary schools and where it could potentially be an issue, I did want to ask, kind of comparing this projection here on this slide to the slide it's numbered 4 in it, where the projection performance says that the biggest ones that were off were also Oxbridge and Tokenique. So how can we think about kind of reconciling the ones that didn't hit their targets this year and now are expected to be like the big drivers again?
So what we've been doing is we've been looking at home sales. So we've been getting home sales by address and matching them up and looking at the trends there. But what we're still finding is that K has been challenging for us, and lower elementary right now has been challenging for us to be able to kind of tighten those up a little bit more, especially with the lack of turnover that we're seeing in each of the attendance zones, to be honest with you. It's something that we're seeing the same trends in many of the communities, but we're also seeing enrollment fluctuating. And we know in Darien, you get a couple home sales and you have a family move in with some young children. All of a sudden you're at +5, +6 students over what you had projected just because of where the market is right now.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? Sarah?
This is for Dr. Byrne and maybe Rich. So I think Mr. Dunn was alluding to the big bad R word of redistricting. Just throwing that out on the table. Is that something that you think this I mean, with the new, is that something we need to be thinking about, or is that something that, we think we can? where we
So
are?
I want to reserve a response until I do the analysis of the capacity first,
Great.
but we'll take a look at that and come back to the board with that.
Okay, other questions? All right, thank you so much for your analysis and
Thank you.
presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. You too. Okay, so we are moving on to. hold on a second. Okay, presentation and discussion on Middlesex Middle School facility study. We have Mr. Kevin Munret and Mr. Eric Kyer, Mr. Travis Schnell from KG&D Architects. Thank you.
Good evening. Hi, Eric Kyer, KGD Architects. I'm here with my partner, Travis Snell, who you probably know from the Hindley Homes and Royal Building Committee meetings on a bi-weekly basis. We're here this evening to talk about the facilities assessment and master plan effort that has been ongoing over the course of the summer and fall, and give you a brief update. But before going in there, really just wanted to do a quick call out. It was great last week. We went to the school board and superintendent's conference. We got an opportunity to see a few of you there at that school boards. It was great to spend a little bit of time with you. So thanks for being there. And also a call out to our partners, ONG and APC Construction, who were also at that school boards conference. They've been great partners for the Hindley Homes and Royal projects. I'm sure you've all seen the progress, but I have over the 25 plus years that I've been doing school projects, this project has been going as smoothly as any, and the partnership and friendships, et cetera, that have been going on have been terrific. And on this Thanksgiving week, we were especially thankful for the Hindley Homes and Royal Building Committee members, and especially to the leadership from Chris Price and Jill McCammon over the course of that. The whole committee has been really thoughtful and powerful leaders in this whole process, not to mention the school administrators, the principals that are part of it. So before turning this over to Travis, who's going to review the facilities assessment portion of this presentation, I just wanted to compliment Kate and her administration team for their assistance and as part of this, and for the facilities team led by Kevin Munret, who's in the back of the room here, for the excellent maintenance of Middlesex and all the school district buildings. They do a great job. So this really was sort of a pleasure to go through the buildings because of the conditions that are currently existing there. This facilities needs project and process is not about challenges there. It's really about 25 years of building systems that are getting to be antiquated at this point. And as you just heard with the last presentation, when this project was done 25 years ago, it was for 900 students, and now we're in the range of 1,100 students. And so with those additional students, it requires additional classrooms and labs and other spaces associated in the building. So that's what this is really about. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Travis.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. All right, let's get into the facilities report. So just to give a brief overview of the middle school campus, you have one main academic building, you have natural grass playing fields, you have parking spaces, 120 spaces, and a full-size bus queuing. Your total building area is 195,000 square feet, and the age of the building, originally the original portion, which is up front, was 1925, and then you had the balance of the work was an addition in 2000 with the gym that was also dated back in the 60s. Total campus acreage is 16 plus years, and replacement value for in-kind ranges from $190 million to $200 million. So going into the facilities assessment in more detail. So generally speaking, to give you an overview, when we go into a master plan, the first thing that we like to do is to do a building condition survey. So before we look at your 5-year plan, we see what your current facilities are like. That means meeting with the administration and the staff at the building, seeing what the current issues are, and then taking our team, which consists of architects, engineers, and a roofing consultant, and then we go around and we do a visual review of the facility. So generally speaking, the good news is there are no major issues at the middle school. It's in generally good condition, and there's no immediate life safety concerns that need attention right away. But considering that it is 25 years since your last major work, a lot of systems are aging out, and that's what our report generally shows. So we generally group our observations into 4 priority levels, which we have also broken into 2 different categories. So priorities 1 through 3, we're putting in category A, which are actionable items that are part of our assessment and planning. Priority 1, as we stated, you don't have any of these issues, but those would be immediate life safety issues. They might include failing structure, minor roof leaks, and building envelope issues. And if you had like fire alarms that weren't functioning. Priority 2 were items that are health and safety, health and property related, but they're not like immediate issues. And there's something that could be treated over the next 5 years. So that could be non-functioning HVAC and outdated roofs. Priority 3 is more age-related items that just need to be replaced. They've aged out, worn finishes, outdated HVAC, and we're lumping into this also critical program needs that the school needs to function. These should be addressed within the 5-year period. And then category B, which we're not really focusing on, these are deferred items. These are kind of nice to haves. They might be outdated finishes. They might be non-critical program needs that can be addressed within 10 years. So a good chunk of the work here and what we're calling priority 2 work is roof replacement. Again, your roofs are past their useful life. They are out of warranty. There are some minor roof leaks, but nothing major. The last round of roofing that occurred, your rotunda was done a couple of years ago under emergency project because you did have leaking going on. So that was replaced, and your slate roof continues to be in good condition. Slate roofs last a long time and you're good there. So the scheduled replacement is everything else. So that's a balance of 79,000 square feet of roof that's beyond its useful life. And so when we do that replacement, we'll also be increasing the insulation to meet current energy codes. We'll be changing out the skylights. And in addition, we'll be doing any associated masonry work. And we also have some masonry work where you have some spot repairs on the facade to just button all that up. So that we're lumping into priority 2. Priority 3, we're including interior upgrades. So at your library, you really need new furniture and you could replace the flooring. Again, these are all recommendations. And we've also, the bigger item here is that the library is not efficiently functioning for the needs of the current program requirements of the school. Classrooms, corridors, and cafeterias, again, generally in good condition. We're calling to replace the ceiling tiles. That's what ACT is, acoustical ceiling tiles. That coincides with lighting replacement work. The auditorium is undersized right now to fit a full grade plus. So we recommend increasing seating count, and it really could be a spruced up space. The finishes are very outdated, so we're calling for a full renovation. The offices are all solid doors right now. It's good for security and vision purposes to replace those doors with vision panels, windows, and they can use ceilings and flooring as well. Toilet rooms are in good condition, and we would just replace right now the ceiling. And then a couple of non-compliance items. You still have old wire glass doors and windows that we would call to be replaced with proper and updated fire resistance rated glazing. And then the main entrance, we would add a canopy and provide a security and welcome office. And in the priority 3 work continued in the MEP portion of this is the HVAC system, which is nearing the end of its useful life, is outdated, and does not provide a building-wide air conditioning. You're also supplementing that with a lot of window air conditioning units, which is not an efficient use of your energy. So that's the majority of those bullet points are all items that deal with upgrading the overall building's HVAC units. Also, your building management system that controls all of that is outdated. It needs to be fully replaced. And your kitchen currently is still running on propane gas, and it needs to be converted to the natural gas that is now serving the facility. And there's an old oil tank that you no longer need. That should also be removed as part of the assessment. And to continue into the electrical work, upgrades here include the electrical rooms should have their own dedicated cooling systems to keep those areas functioning properly. That equipment tends to get hot, needs dedicated equipment. And then you would need an electrical service upgrade to account for the added load due to adding air conditioning and upgraded HVAC throughout the building. Scheduled replacement for electrical also includes lighting throughout the corridors, classrooms, and offices. It would include upgrading the auditorium lighting and sound system and a complete replacement of the outdated public address and intercom system. All right, so with that, I'll turn it over back to Eric to go into the master plan portion.
So what we heard, the school is designed for 900 students. And now the class size is approximately 360 students each, closer to 1,100 than 900. And what does that mean? It means that we don't have enough classrooms or labs or special subject spaces. So as a part of this master plan, it's planning to have additional classroom space, as well as faculty workspace, which when it was a 900 student school had faculty workrooms, but all those workrooms were taken over the course of the last 25 years to be utilized as classroom space. So creating new faculty workspace would be important. Here, Travis mentioned the auditorium. This master plan is going to look at two different options. One is to renovate the existing auditorium, and the other is to replace and provide a new auditorium for the middle school. The library really should be reimagined. Today, all the furniture and bookshelves, et cetera, in the room are all relatively fixed and heavy. It should really be looked at as furniture that can be rearrangeable so that the space can be used for multiple purposes over the course of the day, creating more technology-rich space, as well as around the perimeter. There's a lot of potential spaces that could be converted into collaborative spaces that currently are used for other purposes and storage and things like that. So this would be a great opportunity to really rethink the library, which is in a perfect location. So it's right in the middle of the building. It's a big, wonderful room, lots of natural light. How do we use it to its best purpose? And then the cafeteria. This year is the first year that you've tried having the cafeteria, having the entire grade in there all at once. It seems to be working, functioning okay. But the cafeteria also should be renovated in terms of the lighting and finishes and furniture in there. That would be wonderful to do some work to there. And as you heard from Travis, is the lobby security. Right now you have the welcome officer and desk that's directly in the lobby. It doesn't have a private office. And so to do a little bit of work at the lobby entrance would be important. It doesn't want to move. Okay. So before we did the facilities assessment, we started imagining what the different options are here. And so we started on the left two renovation and addition options. So in this case, everything that you see in purple is the existing building, and anything that you see in blue is new construction. So the left two are two different locations where you could potentially put an addition. One is off to the east side. Why put it there? Well, currently the building is kind of surrounded on the other three sides with program that's relatively fixed. On the south side, it's residential. On the west side, you have the original 100-year-old building as of this year that is stately sitting up on the hill, and it's a wonderful sort of first image as you come onto campus. And then on the north side, you have two different vehicular circulation patterns. You have the parents and parking, and you have the bus circulation pattern. So it's a very easy location to put it off on the east side. There's some property and space there to put a small addition over there. If you put it on the north side, you can see that starts to take over where the existing bus turnoff, drop off and pickup and queuing areas. So then we'd have to do some work rethinking how that circulation is. The other two were sort of initial out of the box. What if this building was taken down or mostly taken down and replaced? And as you heard from the earlier discussion, this building does not need to be replaced. It's in good working condition for the most part. Obviously, there's some systems that need to be upgraded, needs to be expanded because of the population, but it really doesn't need to be replaced. And you'll see at the end of this presentation, we do put some dollar amounts to that. We also put a dollar amount to a replacement building. And so whenever you're looking at additions and alterations, you should look at it in comparison to other options. So we'll talk about that at the end. So the two options are really sort of derivatives of the same option. And so one has a new theater and the other does not. And that's the real difference here in the two options. So what are we looking at? We're looking at constructing a 12 lab addition on the east end of the building. That would be a 2-story addition. It basically is flat and level land right up to the tree line. And then once you hit the tree line, the site falls away. Once we do that renovation or that new construction for the 12 lab addition, then we can renovate the existing science labs in the building for other purposes, classrooms and workrooms primarily. You have boys and girls locker rooms, which are underutilized at the middle school level, and we're seeing that consistently in other school districts as well. This is a great opportunity to gain some space for additional fitness rooms. And then other sort of major spaces that we're looking to renovate include the existing auditorium in this case, music and art, the ALC and special ed on the second floor, the library commons, and the cafeteria. So, somehow this got cut off, but sorry. On the right there, you can see in blue is proposed 2-story, 12 classroom science lab addition. And then in purple are the existing building. In dark purple are the major renovated spaces, which include existing science rooms, the existing library, the ALC classrooms on the far left, that's on the second floor. You can see the auditorium that's in the middle on the left. And then top left is where the security vestibule is, as well as where the locker rooms could be converted into PE studios. And right in the middle is that beautiful library, which could use some renovation and reimagination. The second version of this includes a theater. And so the real only difference between the option 1A and option 1B is this theater. And I'm going to jump right into this theater, which again, the addition shows a 12 classroom lab addition, but it also includes an auditorium. That auditorium is stepping down the hillside because the hill falls away. And you'll see in the next slide, one of the wonderful things about having an auditorium that steps down is that when you have little voices and they're talking straight out, they don't project their voice as well as when you're looking up and you're projecting your voice. So when you have a raked auditorium, you have a wonderful opportunity to hear the performers that are on the stage. And when you have great sight lines, you also have great hearing. So there's a real advantage to having an auditorium that steps like that. And so the only difference in terms of the renovation would be the transformation of the existing auditorium into other spaces, whether that's art or makerspace or other purposes to be discussed. Here's just a couple of examples. So the one on the left is one of these raked auditoriums that we designed. And again, if you see and you can hear. And so it's really a wonderful opportunity to provide a larger auditorium. Again, current auditorium is about 400 seats. And so, we're not saying exactly how many seats this would be, but probably twice as many seats. And that would provide ample seating for the majority of the students on campus. So while we were in this meeting, we actually built this. And so you can see in this photograph right here, this is from Dr. Burns' helicopter provided by the school district, looking down on the building itself. And on the left, you can see the proposed 42,000 square foot addition, 2-story, and it has an entrance there between the auditorium and the cafeteria, which could be a special events entrance. So you could actually close off the majority of the building when you're having evening events and open it up so that you could utilize the theater or the cafeteria or the gymnasium independent of all the other spaces in the building. So of course, this is what you've all been waiting for in terms of dollars and cents. Travis talked about a lot of the assessment. So he mentioned roof replacement. There's about $7.5 million worth of planned roof replacement as part of this master plan project. There's also $20 million worth of mechanical, electrical, plumbing, which also includes the replacement of all those acoustic ceiling tiles and the lighting associated with all the classrooms and corridors and office spaces in there. There's an additional 11 million plus or minus dollars of interior renovation. And that's some of those spaces that we mentioned, the library, the auditorium, the locker rooms, and the lobby vestibule. And then for the planned addition, which is for the science labs, that's a $36 million amount for that, which is a total of about $75 million for the option 1A. When we add the theater, the $36 million number turns to about $50 million to add the theater and music addition to that. And that total brings the overall project plus or minus a $90 million number. These are our internal numbers that we're sharing with you. We would recommend that, and we had discussions with ONG APC about this. They'd be happy to look at these documents as well and do a second a version of doing a takeoff here, because it's really good to have a second opinion as to the numbers. But this is a fairly close number to what we would assume with both these projects, somewhere in the $75 to $90 million, depending on which version you look at. So the only change here is it also shows at the bottom, if we were to replace this building, Travis said at the beginning, 195,000 square foot was approximately $200 million project. If we're replacing this, we're also putting an addition on to accommodate the extra 200 students. That replacement value for that building is about $240 million. So when you're looking at this, you kind of really want to compare the renovation and addition to what a replacement value would be. With that, I'll open it up to questions.
Thank you for the presentation. I just have one question and we'll open up for board comments. Just if you could also address the capacity planning piece, because I know we did, I think it was in 2015, reach peak enrollment of about 1,170 students, and the 10-year projection shows us getting to that same level, which is about, I think, 100 more what we have now. Could you also describe how these two versions would address, would it have the needed number of classrooms to give us additional flexibility in both of those options? And one of them contains a cafeteria expansion and the other does not. So the reasoning behind that as well, please.
So addressing the second part first in terms of the cafeteria. So in both options, we do have a lobby space or an open space that's adjacent to the cafeteria. So even in the second version, the thought here was that that lobby would double during the day because you don't need a whole open space there. It could double. We would have a large storage space adjacent to that. We could have tables and chairs, and that could be expansion area for the cafeteria if necessary. I think that in option 1A, the size of that commons probably would get scaled back as we examined this farther. When we started looking at this, we knew that the cafeteria, we were going from multiple cafeteria periods per grade to everybody from a single grade in the cafeteria all at once. And so this was the first year that we were testing this. And so at first we were thinking that that cafeteria was going to need to expand more to accommodate an entire grade of 360 plus or minus students at one time. And what we're finding out is that they can be accommodated in there. The real challenge is in a day where it's raining and people can't go outside is how do you accommodate all those people when they're finished their lunch and where did they go? And a lot of times they use the library, they use open corridor space. They might be able to go to the gym, the gym's open. So we're trying to provide a space that they can go to during lunch period that's outside of the confines of the cafeteria itself. In terms of yes, back in 2016, I think the enrollment was capping out at about 1,150 or something to that range. And so we are below that and we're creeping back up to something close to that. This is about a difference between year 2000 when you were at 900 students and between 2000 and 2016, it grew and there were basically it grew without the building growing. And so the way that you as a school district addressed that is you took spaces over. First of all, you did a great job of utilizing all the spaces that you have, but you also took spaces over that were used for faculty and other purposes and converted them to classrooms so that you could educate the additional 200 kids that were in the building that the building grew into.
Thank you. Questions from the board? Katie?
Thank you. I wanted to ask more about the cafeteria. So I'm a bit unclear. It looked to me like the difference between 1A and 1B was that there was like a cafeteria edition in 1A and then 1B was the theater edition separately. But as you went through it, it sounds more that while it's mentioned in the slides, there aren't really plans for any sort of changes to the cafeteria other than the sort of mechanical upgrades. Is that correct?
So the cafeteria is all the finishes. So the floors, ceilings, lighting, as well as we were looking at the servery and how flow of the servery works. Because when we go from half the class being in there at one time to the entire class being in there at the same time, you need to flow twice as many students through the cafeteria at the same time or through the serving lines. And so that was probably going to address expanding that servery so that you could accommodate more students in the same amount of time so that they're not all standing in line for the majority of their lunch period.
So that's the reason that the line items the interior renovations, that they don't change from 1A to 1B?
That's correct. They would be the same in both of those.
Okay. And then one final question about that is what conversations were had about incorporating the district's sustainable kitchen initiative into the middle school?
Oh, we definitely had that discussion. This is master planning and it's not schematic or full design services. The thought is that sustainable food service would be incorporated into this. But in terms of putting dollar and cents to it, it was just basically a line item that we provided an allowance.
But there would be considerations made for that in terms of the electrical implications for additional dishwashers and those types of
So
factors.
as Travis mentioned earlier, there's a whole new service associated with mechanical systems. So those mechanical systems would include the systems in the kitchen.
Right. I just want to make sure that the sustainable component is a part of that and not an afterthought, because if we're spending a lot of money to update mechanical in the cafeteria and that's not a component of it, it would be a missed opportunity, in my opinion.
Gentlemen, we included a quote that Kevin.
Can we go to the link?
That Kevin Monrette gave us for when you had your food service team give you a price to include like a dishwasher, and really is what you need is a dishwasher to handle the load of the reusable dishes. So that is in there as part of the renovation number for the server. But
Thank
again,
you.
we would have to do further design to understand the actual layout.
Thank you.
Other questions? Dennis?
Yeah, so this is more a question to Eric, I think. Since we have new members and the public, can you walk through what the plan would be if we wanted to go down this road, and how this works for a building committee? And went way too far ahead, but how do we get to a building committee if we wanted to do that?
That's a great question. I'm gonna ask for a lifeline with some help from my colleagues because I have it written down.
So if there's interest from the board in pursuing it, the next step is we'd have to draw up ed specs. And so the ed specs would scope out what you want in the project, sustainable kitchens, the roofs, et cetera. Any academic items that you want to change, and we are working with KG&D on starting those. The board would then have to review those ed specs, decide whether or not they want to approve the ed specs. Then if you approve the ed specs, the Board of Ed would have to request a building committee to be created by the Board of Selectmen. So if the Board of Ed votes to request a building committee for the middle school, that would go to the Board of Selectmen. The Selectmen would have to decide either they're going to have a building committee or they're not going to have a building committee. If they choose to have a building committee, then they're going to have to obviously solicit members of the community to join that building committee. And at that point, you're probably getting a little bit of seed money from the Board of Finance and the RTM to look at creating like architectural documents and construction documents based on those ed specs.
Thank you.
And just to clarify, the administration recommends the ed specs to the board and then we approve them.
Correct.
No, the 9 of us are not creating.
You are not.
Correct.
Other questions? Bill?
So in terms of the auditorium and the one depicted here, how does that compare? Do you know how it compares to the existing high school auditorium? Is it similar size? Is the high school bigger?
I believe isn't your high school 1,200? Yeah, I believe your high school is 1,200 and this would be probably about 2/3 that size. It's hard to do an auditorium for all the students in the school because you use an auditorium fairly seldomly compared to the rest of the spaces in the building. So you usually design, except for the high school level, which often is designed for the entire school body. Usually at the middle school level, it's usually designed for about 2/3 the school body.
And it's a little bit hard to tell, but the elevation for the science classroom wing that you put on the back there, is that below grade from the roof line of the existing building?
So the existing building's 3 stories and that would be a 2-story addition. So it's 1 level lower than the existing building. Part of that has to do with the width of the courtyard between the two is about 40 feet. And you really want to bring natural light in. And if you have 2 3-story buildings with a fairly narrow courtyard, you're not getting a whole lot of natural light in there. And so those classrooms don't receive the natural light that they currently have. So we're at the same time, we don't need a 3rd floor. We could obviously design this for a 3rd floor for the future, but right now we need approximately 12 lab spaces for science and technology. And so this building was designed for 6 labs per level with 3 prep rooms associated with those 6 labs times 2 levels.
And when you design that, would it be, even if you don't build a 3rd floor, I might not be able to answer this, but would the construction bid change significantly if you were designing a building with the ability to add a 3rd floor at some point or half of the 3rd floor?
If you plan for it early, it's not a significant difference. It's very difficult on your existing buildings today that you have in town, very difficult to add a story on top.
Right.
Typically, because the structure wasn't designed for it. And even if it was, over the course of the last 10, 20, 30 years, the codes have changed. And so the structural loads and seismic loads are different today. And so even if we had designed it for that purpose 30 years ago, today we probably wouldn't be able to put that third floor on. So you have to be a little bit careful there because codes are going to continue to change. If we're designing this for a third floor, you'd have to think that, okay, in the next 10 years, we're going to plan on putting it. Otherwise, you shouldn't do it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sarah?
This is more maybe for Kate or for Kevin. I'm trying to think of some revenue stream here. If we were to build a larger theater, you know, I know back from my days of doing the Holmes H Factor that, you know, it was hard to find dates from the high school because the high school auditorium was used often from outside groups and other things. Is there a possibility that having a second space would be worthwhile to the district? And is that something, should that be part of our?
I
our
think
thought
it could be
process?
worthwhile to the district and the broader community.
Right, exactly.
That certainly would
Yes.
be, you know, with that size, you know, you have events or organizations within the community that need an auditorium for 800, but they don't need an auditorium for 1,200. And as we all know, getting access to the high school auditorium because of how many events are there is really challenging. So it would also probably become very well used by the elementary schools for
Right.
lots of programming. So it would be a valuable resource to the entire school district and beyond to, I believe, the broader community. And certainly potentially, I mean, I'm not sure, once you start using it all over the district, what the availability and how much revenue could come in from the outside, but it certainly could be a stream of revenue.
Not 14 million.
Joanna?
So one of the reasons that we started, or, you know, one of the reasons that we started to talk about all this is because we do have all these, you know, the 25 years of the age of the building, and especially the roof in our original capital plan was supposed to be like 17 million almost over 2 years. I see in your estimate that it's only 7. So just, you know, if we were to go down this path in anticipation of people coming back to us and saying, you know, why were you recommending we do this huge project when it would only cost 7 million instead of 17 million to replace the roof? So maybe this is more a question for Kevin. Why are these estimates so different?
Sure. I think the easy answer is you have a large economy of scale when you're doing a project of this size versus just a true roof replacement. The roof on the rotunda was damaged 2 years ago. We used the square foot price that we paid at that time to calculate the estimate for the roof that you saw in the capital plan.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Dave?
Hey, Kevin. Quick question. I don't know if this is a suburban legend, but I always heard that when the addition was done, that this sort of phase 1A was planned for, and there's some conduits and piping and maybe some things in place. I don't know if that's true.
It is. Working closely with Mr. Schreiner on the Oxbridge Building Committee, he oversaw the expansion of this building 20-something years ago, and he clued me into a lot of that infrastructure, that this was a thought way back when.
So I know we're just in the master plan concept there, but I think when we get to costs, I would assume that there's some advantages to going to that eastern spur.
That's exactly right.
Okay. And then just another question, and I guess 2 questions probably for the master plan. You know, just thinking that through. I guess one is, did we think of doing anything with the elevation to maybe increase the green space on the lot? Or was that outside the scope?
I don't understand the question.
Underground parking, doing things like that.
Oh, underground parking?
I'm just, because there's a lot of changes in elevation in this land, and we've actually had some of that happen in Darien. So I don't know if that was part of what we were thinking through, is the master plan concept.
Typically in schools, we try to avoid underground or structured parking. Parking that's in the structure is about 10 times as expensive as grade level parking.
Okay.
On a campus where you're out of space, sometimes it's necessary. And so sometimes you have that underground parking, and on top of that, you put playing fields and things like that. Again, from a safety point of view, we also try to avoid having, parking garages on school campuses,
Okay,
if we don't have to.
got it. Yeah, I was just trying to get how broad the scope.
You do have a lot of property here because you used to have a school that was down the hill. And so you have that property that could be utilized for a number of different purposes, whether now or in the future.
And I guess that was the other thought. We haven't thought about a traffic study or anything like that in that plan. This is not considered, that was in scope.
So this isn't really about expanding the school population. As you heard from the demographics report, the students are already there. The teachers are already there. The buses and the cars and all the traffic that's currently there isn't planned to change for the next 10 years.
Got it. If we stick with the rebuild options.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
trying to think
I
of
mean,
how broad the thought.
We saw an option here tonight where we actually added in the foreground there where the bus
Yep.
facilities. So if you were to add there, then yes, you'd have to rethink how the buses are coming on campus, where they're queuing, how they're coming off. You probably wouldn't want all that traffic on Hollow Tree, but that would be something that you would start to think about.
No, I don't think anybody would. All right, so I appreciate that. Yeah, I was just trying to understand as you were thinking through, how far you were going from moving away. And I guess the only other question I would have, and probably too soon in the process, and I can't say that I'm sold on an auditorium by any stretch, but just the cost differential from getting the entire school in that at 1,200 versus the 800 would be curious to know. I heard your recommendation. It's unusual to go above the 2/3. I'm just conceptually be curious how big a difference. And I'm not putting you on the spot if you don't know right
The
now.
difference was like $14 million from one. Yeah, so the difference was about $14 million from not having the theater at all to having a theater. So if we're just extrapolating, it's probably another $5-6 million.
Got it. Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I think Greg had a question.
Yes, thank you. And sorry if there's background noise about the airport. Really just more, very similar in terms of the question that Dave asked in terms of the scope of the work that's been done here. I had the same question around parking, traffic flow. I recognize that everything's happening today, but there are often times where the parking lot is completely full, over capacity. Traffic is very terrible inside, in the parking lot and around the school. And then separately, in terms of the scope, is it also the exterior grounds? Have you thought about the utilization of the fields, both the upper field and the lower field? I know the upper field oftentimes is used or unable to be used due to overuse and irrigation issues. Was that part of the scope, or was it really just focused on the building?
That was a little bit beyond the scope of this project. We did in a couple versions look at if we were to completely change the school and the school location, obviously we would be redoing all the playing fields. There's obviously an opportunity here to go from grass fields to synthetic fields, which would get more use. School district has a lot of turf fields already, so that might not be necessary. And you also have some opportunity down the hill there, which is also your property, to create an additional field if you so wanted to. And if you did that, would that mean that you'd have an opportunity to expand your parking or a drop-off area? Would be a possibility, whether it's up above or below, depending on the best location for fields and parking.
Eric, field use could become part of the ed specs conversation as well, correct? Since it's-
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In the ed specs, we cover all of that.
Other questions? Joanna?
If we went forward with a new theater, what would you recommend for turning in the old music rooms and the old art rooms? Because the art would then move to the old auditorium. Do you have any thoughts on how you would utilize those rooms?
So this is a draft report, and I think we're going to spend more time with Kate and the administrators to really plan out how to best use that. There's, again, as we grown from 900 to 1,100, we don't have enough art space. We don't have enough music space. And so there's great opportunities there. We really don't have technology makerspace type labs. to the size and enumeration that we probably should, as well as the ALC program that's on the second floor. As that gets renovated, does that expand into? So there's a lot of opportunity for that space. And because it's a double height, are there programs that would like to take advantage of a double height space? Black box theater. Maybe we have a mini theater here, and then as well as the regular theater, and the mini theater has a multiple potential uses, and it really becomes more of a multi-purpose space.
Right, so there are a lot of possibilities that the ed specs would drive.
Dennis?
Do we, in the concept 1A, where you renovate the auditorium, what does that get us? Just
It gets
is
you a
just
really-
updated and still 400
It
people.
gives
and
you
very-
a really wonderful 400-seat theater for
Okay.
one class size. It gives you modern sound systems and lighting and stage and curtains and rigging and things like that, and better seating. Today, you have two columns in the middle, so it's like going to Fenway Park or something.
Hey, I'm a Red Sox fan, so.
So you understand. The one time I went, I'm a Yankee fan. The one time I went, they forced me to sit directly behind the column.
Sarah?
I'd love to hear from Kate a little bit about your priorities and, you know, what your thoughts are on all this.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a really exciting conversation to be having. So first of all, I appreciate all of the work that the team has done and for you all for taking the time and all the thoughtful questions, and hopefully the ongoing dialogue that we get to have about this. One of the most important words that has come up for me in our conversations has been flexibility, because there's so much opportunity for curriculum to evolve over time, for the needs of our students to evolve over time, for instructional models to evolve over time. We've seen the number of teams change over time. And so it is important to me that as we think about what Middlesex needs, we're both very thoughtful about the students and the curriculum in our building today and the capacity for change over time, because this is a long-term commitment that we could be making. Dennis, to your question about not just a nice upgrade to the theater, our current stage is not big enough to fit an entire ensemble on. So as an instructional space, that theater is also limited in capacity in terms of what, my whole musical cast can't necessarily fit on the stage to do a choreography number together. All of our ensembles have to go up to the high school to rehearse as a full ensemble for their concerts and then perform up there. So I think that is a really exciting potential for our building as we consider the really incredible K-12 music and visual arts that this district has. I think about our library, when I was having conversations with our wonderful librarian, Denise Ryan, leading up to these conversations, we talked about how the library is sort of a welcoming space for everyone in our building. And we lovingly called it kind of like the academic living room of the school, because it's available to everyone and it needs to be flexible. It needs to meet academic needs. It needs to be a space that people can collaborate, that people can have quiet time, that there can be all the different dynamic learning and community collaboration. To me, I think about our vision of the graduate and the opportunity for us to engage in ways that are truly building communication and curiosity and creativity. When I think about those learning lab classrooms, it's not just that we need more science labs, and we do need more science labs, but we need spaces that are able to evolve as instruction and assessment practices have evolved. Our current classrooms, as they alluded to, we have some of those classrooms were designed to be book and work rooms. And so they're pretty petite. And you can't do a really strong thinking classroom model with students collaborating in a room where there's not room for all the students to be up and walking around. And so there's things that we could be improving in our instruction and our assessment and our learning and our sense of learning community together through this project. I also think the opportunity in the ALC program is a really tremendous to continue to meet the needs of those learners. We've talked about how beautiful it would be to expand the life skills instruction capacity of that space right now. Just as a concrete example, the kitchen space up in ALC right now is really more of a tiny little, what you might have in the back of an office. There's a fridge, there's a microwave, there's a tiny counter. There's not a space for 8 to 10 children to come together with the appropriate adults to do integrated learning around how to operate different things in a kitchen. So I believe that there is such opportunity for us to continue to grow, and that's exciting to me.
Other questions? John?
You mentioned the not being able to fit the whole ensemble in the auditorium. What other impact would a bigger auditorium have specifically for the middle section?
Absolutely. So currently, if we want to run an assembly. So for example, we're fortunate to have Tanner Clark a few weeks ago. We had Victoria Jameson, our author, visit. Anytime we do an event like that, we have to run it 3 times over the course of the day because we can't fit. Those have cost impacts. Every time you run an assembly, there's an additional cost to run it that 3rd time. So we would be able to do those things in a less disruptive way to the school schedule, not pulling 3 different groups, but also not repeating things. Additionally, I think that we use our auditorium for community events like the 8th grade award ceremony at the end of the year, or other opportunities when our parents come in for 5th grade curriculum night. It's a little packed in there. It's cozy, which we love cozy. Community's good. And it'd be great to have enough space to really fit everyone in a welcoming way. I think that, today we had our team day in the auditorium for our 6th grade teams, and congrats to the Orange team on their victory. And again, you could hear the cheers erupting through the building, which was so lovely in its own way. And another auditorium might give us a better opportunity to hold those kind of events in a productive manner.
Other questions? Bill?
If you could, please, is the proposed addition of the classrooms, is that enough space for you so that teachers can have their own classrooms? And are they switching classrooms frequently now as the schedules demand?
So it's a tricky question to pin down a definite answer to because there's so many variables in the scheduling and so many ways that what courses our kids take could evolve over time. What I can say concretely right now is that we have many of our world language teachers sharing classes right now. And we have some of our science teachers sharing classes right now. People who are sharing rooms are sometimes across multiple floors, and with our very short passing period, that's tricky, and not best instructional practice in terms of keeping things set up. Because we are in a grade teaming model, our science rooms in particular, you have 6th grade and another grade in the same space. They don't share the same equipment materials for their curriculum. So that is difficult. And I think it would be one of the benefits of being able to have the additional science spaces, that those spaces could be protected in the instruction, and doing that would create the additional classrooms. And my hope would be that we could get most, if not all, of our teachers in their own spaces, because I do think there's benefit in that, and it's a nice to have, and it's going to depend on size over time.
In terms of the layout, having all the science classrooms in one section, how would that affect the change of class? Say going from English class to science, and if I have to cross the building.
That's a really great question. I think it's also going to be important for us to think about the team model in that, because we don't want our science teachers to feel disconnected. What I would say is right now, our kids are not only on one floor all day. So even though they might have their 6th grade classes up on the 3rd floor in the penthouse, they're also still going downstairs for gym and downstairs for music, and the cafeteria is downstairs, and our 8th graders are going upstairs for art. So people do move across floors, and that's manageable. I wouldn't be, and because as Dave Brown alluded to, not only is the urban legend about the electrical piping, et cetera, things I don't understand, the hallways are numbered 40s and 60s so that there'd be room for the 50s. So it was, you know, that section of the building is so adjacent to where so many of the instructional materials take place that I do feel like it would work for our kids.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? Okay, so
One last thing,
Dennis.
just a point of information. Eric mentioned the library reimagined. We did discuss this at facilities maybe 5 or 6 years ago, libraries reimagined, and we punted because we realized we would have to do some work at Middlesex, and not do some, but we thought we may have to do some work, and we didn't think that putting a library and reimagining a library and then doing work and having the library construction affect the construction. So we
Smart.
punted on doing that until this
Smart
came through.
decision. Yeah.
Sarah?
Sorry, I'm just looking more closely at the drawings and you're talking about the accessibility and this is not for you, Kate. Moving kids around the building. I'm noticing that the new wing is not connected on the south side to the old, is there
No.
reasoning for that or?
It is. You can't see
You're
the
gonna have a
bridge.
skywalk?
That's the bridge.
That's a detail that might change. Right now it was shown open on the south side with probably a gate so that the facilities, people could get in to access that courtyard. But ultimately, it might be determined that the best course of action there would be having a 2-story connector all the way through and just having sets of double doors so that, again, if you have lawn equipment or whatever, that can go through the building.
Thanks.
It's a
Are there
good
other
question, though,
questions?
because we'd actually spoken about that internally a little bit.
Any other questions? Dave?
Just following up on Dennis's history lesson, when we were looking at the libraries reimagined, we incorporated some of that for the elementary schools, right?
Yeah,
And did we ever finalize ed specs for the middle school, or we just?
we punted on the middle school.
I'm just trying.
The libraries reimagined, sorry.
No, all good.
The libraries reimagined were for HHR and that they were incorporated in those and
Right.
Oxbridge as well.
But did we have overall principles that would just kind of roll in the middle school, or we didn't? We just kept it at the K?
I think we had
K-5
principals.
I think we did too.
I think we did.
Yeah, some of that stuff.
Are there other questions? Okay, so I am gathering that we have a consensus from the group that we would like to go forward with a renovation. Is there a consensus with the board?
The ed
A-
specs.
Well, I mean, I'm saying, should this go back to the facilities committee
Yeah.
for further detailed follow-up with architects, et cetera? Okay. Then we will, is there consensus on that?
Can you just say that again, just so that we're all clear on what we're doing?
I believe there is additional work to be done and follow up to get a little bit more detail on what we would potentially want, and that the facilities committee would be the right group to follow up on that. Dave?
So do you want facilities to go back and like aggregate questions and come up with stuff so we can reconvene at the board and talk about this and what next steps would be? Is that the thought, or should we put this on for the entire board to read us? To talk about this a little bit next step?
What would the facilities committee
How does
members,
it work in the past?
how did it work with the other?
Well, we didn't have, we didn't do it, we don't have I think the main concern for me as a former facilities chair, because I'm not the facilities chair now, because we haven't elected a chair, but is what do you want the facilities committee to discuss? Because there's 3-4 different options. So I think we need to narrow the focus as to what the board wants the facilities to discuss.
Right, and that's why I say if it's like people have questions and follow up and want to know next steps, and we can organize like some stuff to come back to economize the board's time. That seems reasonable if people want that, but like we're a million miles from doing ed specs.
Yes.
So Dave, I think that's a good suggestion. So if the facilities committee could come up with additional questions or follow up based on the discussion tonight, and follow up, I guess, with the architects if there were additional details that were needed or to expand upon. Would that make sense? And then come back to the full board with a
And I guess,
recommendation?
Greg, if you're on the line, did you have anything in terms of scoping you would like to see follow up on, or did you want to follow up offline for the facilities meeting we can discuss?
Yeah, I do think that we should understand implications and the scope as it relates to outside of the building too. You know, I heard a lot about the auditorium, you know, being expanded upon. I'm interested in how many parking spots we actually have there. If it is expanded, can we even fit those folks in the parking lot? You know, how does the traffic flow work? Can we improve upon that? I think as the number of students have expanded, we've adjusted, but the adjustment I know is painful for parents and for students alike, and for the bus drivers who have to get through there amidst all that traffic. And so I think understanding if that should be part of the scope would be helpful for the discussion as well.
Okay,
And what about fields or potential there? You had
yeah, so,
mentioned that,
so
Eric.
I guess maybe the question is, do we expand the scope? That's something we should take back to the policy, to the facilities subcommittee. Was this scope inclusive enough? Do we want to look at the lower lot, or are there thoughts we want to do in terms of traffic, get a more comprehensive picture so we can move towards thinking about a decision?
Yeah.
Does that seem like the work people want?
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah.
Just one last
Yeah.
question, Eric. You mentioned the lower lot where the former school was and which became the senior center, I think, or.
Yeah.
Is that town property or school property?
It's town.
Okay,
Technically, it's all town.
It's all good.
right, but
You don't have.
There's one little parcel that's a private residence.
right,
But the
Carved off the
majority is,
side,
is
but-
town property.
And is that still in use now
Yes.
as a,
Uh,
no,
you-
not the private residence, the
former seniors.
former senior center?
That was torn down.
Right.
So it's
It's
an
a-
empty lot right now.
Because I'm looking at, I'm looking at a different picture. That's why, okay.
If you go to Google Earth today, it's gone, but it's actually good to look at Google Earth, the history of it, because it shows when it was taken down.
Okay.
Okay, so
There's a lot more. Okay.
per David Brown's proposal, we can take this back to the facilities committee to ask additional questions, look at the potential scope, including parking, potentially fields as well, or the capacity, or some of the different options between the 75 versus the 85 to $95 million option. And then come back with recommendations to the full board, and then we could discuss as a full board.
And if I may, since, as Dennis pointed out, we don't have a policy chair, could we impose on UCAS to maybe aggregate if people have questions to?
You're talking about facilities chair.
Facilities. Whichever. They're okay. So yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, so Cass, you can aggregate some questions as when they come. Yeah. And we do have a facilities meeting, but it's not in the very near future.
It's December
So-
18th.
We'll
Yeah.
set up a collection point through the weekly update for questions to come in. We'll
great.
put a document together.
Okay,
Sorry, I know
Go
I
ahead.
mentioned this at the facilities committee. I think we asked this. The only question I have is, does the administration, Kevin, do you guys have the bandwidth to deal with this planning while we're still working with HHR and things like that?
So yes, we've talked about this potential project for a number of years now, and Travis and Eric's numbers are all projected out to fiscal year 28. So this is falling in line with what we've planned for the last 4 years.
Okay, just making sure. Thank you.
okay. Thank you all, and thank you for the presentation, and then we will have facilities follow up when that meeting occurs. And people will be able to ask questions and send them through to,
We'll next week's weekly update, we'll have a section for compiling questions.
okay,
Thank you. Have a great Thanksgiving,
Thank
and I just
you.
look forward to hearing the feedback.
thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Sarah, do I have a second? Joanna? In terms of the consent agenda items, we have the approval of minutes, October 2025 financial report, and possible action on proposed budget transfers, board committee reports, and personnel report. I would like Rich to talk about what the proposed budget transfers are, if you could, please.
So we had two transfers. We talked at the finance committee. The first is to fund electricity for $112,256. State of Connecticut did approve a day ahead service initiative, which has increased demand and supply rates. And so that is being projected out for the full year. And we are recommending taking the funding from delayed start to ESY and then some savings in building subs. And then another transfer for $25,000 for HVAC repairs.
Thank you. Are there other items that people would like to discuss on the consent agenda? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? That's Dennis, seconded by Sarah. All in favor? That is unanimous. Greg, were you a yes vote?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor? That is approved. In terms of follow-up action items, I have that Dr. Byrne will follow up on looking at the capacity at elementary schools relative to the projections. I think this specifically was asked about Oxbridge, Tokenique, and Holmes. Once that information is put together, we potentially would talk about redistricting if that was needed, but that's further down the road.
Way down.
Way down the road. That is way down the road. So the initial follow-up is looking at the capacity. The other follow-up then would be following up on the facilities committee. Any questions from the board on the scope of this project that will be funneled over to Dr. Byrne in the weekly update. Those are all that I have for that. And then we'll move on to public comment.
We have no members of the public in the audience.
Thank you. May I have a motion to adjourn?